Hi, and welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to show you step-by-step exactly how to add haptics to a mobile game using Lofelt Studio. Now, Lofelt Studio is a system of tools that allows you to add haptics to any type of mobile application. It doesn't need to be a game. It has support for building iPhone applications via an iOS framework. There's also a Java library if you're building an application for Android. But for the purpose of this tutorial today, I'm going to use the new Unity plugin in order to add haptics to a Unity game, which can then be deployed equally to iOS and Android. So you can get Lofelt Studio from the Lofelt website, which is just lofelt.com. And if you don't have it already, please just sign up for the free trial. During this trial period, all functionality of Lofelt Studio will be working, so you'll be able to follow along step by step with everything I do here. So once you've signed up for the trial, go ahead and click on the Downloads tab, and this will bring you to the Downloads page. Now, at the time that I'm recording this video, the Unity plugin is still in beta. So it's down here in the beta section. You can see it listed here. Now, if you're watching this video a little later in the future, you'll probably find the Unity plugin is actually part of the release version up here at the top. And if it is, you'll see it listed here among the bullets of the components involved. Now, if you're watching this very far in the future, you might have to go get this plugin from the Unity Asset Store. Just look up Lofelt Studio there, and then you'll be able to install this plugin like any other asset from the store. But for today, it's still in beta, so we'll come down here to the beta downloads. Since I'm on Mac, I'm going to download Studio for Mac OS. Obviously, if you're on Windows, you'll download the version for Windows. But then there's also two other links down here for the Studio mobile app, and this is the app that goes on your phone. So if you're using an iPhone, go to the App Store here and download the app. You'll need to have an iPhone 8 or later with iOS 13 on it for it to work. And similarly, if you have an Android phone, you can go to the Google Play Store and download the app from here. So we'll be using that app a little later in this tutorial, but it's also kind of just a cool app to have anyway because it's got some gameplay videos in it, so you can see a bunch of different games with haptics added to them. And it's also got a collection of like ready-to-use haptic and audio assets. There's a whole list of them that you can browse and immediately hear and feel the associated haptics, and you're free to use those in any application that you want to make. There's stuff ranging from application UX to game interactions, and this collection is always growing. So once you've got that and you've downloaded Studio as well, you can take a look at what's in the Studio download. You'll find there's this thing called Studio Desktop. So you've got Studio Mobile on your phone. Studio Desktop is the application that actually runs on your computer. And this is the tool that allows for designing new haptics from audio files. We will be using this a little later in the tutorial, so go ahead and install it. I've already done so. We don't have to wait through that. And I've even got the shortcut icon here on my desktop. But then up here in this SDK folder, this is where you find things like the Java library for Android, the iOS framework when you're programming in Swift, and even example applications for all those platforms. But what we're interested in today is the Unity plugin, which is this package right down here. So we'll be using that once we get Unity up and running. Now, before we get Unity started, we're going to all be working on this platformer microgame that is available from the Unity website. You can find it directly by going to learn.unity.com/project/2D-platformer-template. And that should bring you right to this page here. And as long as you're logged into your account, you should be able to click this little platformer microgame link, and that should throw it into what do they call it? Unity Hub for you. So when you open Unity Hub and you then take a look at the Learn tab, you should see it in your list of things, and I've even downloaded it already so we don't have to wait through that. Now, before we open this project, I just want to mention that Lofelt Studio is compatible with Unity version 2019 and 2020. So make sure you at least have one of these versions installed in order to do this. Additionally, you'll want to make sure that you've got the Android build support installed if you're going to be deploying to Android, or the iOS build support installed if you want to build this for iPhone. So once you've got those things all installed and you at least have one of the 2019 or 2020 versions installed, you can then go ahead and go to the platformer microgame and open the project. And I'll come back as soon as this is finished loading. Okay, if you get this error when trying to load, just go ahead and load default layout. I find that works just fine for me. And you'll get the little welcome screen for getting started with the tutorial. But we don't need to use this right now, so just go ahead and click Explore on your own to close that window, and then we've got Unity up and running here. Just like that. All right, so this is the platformer microgame. And we can take a look. These are all the bits and bobs in here that we're going to be working with as we start to add haptics. And in order to add haptics, we're going to need to first install the Unity plugin that comes with Lofelt Studio. So go ahead and go in, find that Unity package that you downloaded, double click it, and that should bring up the Unity import package dialog box here. Nice list of stuff, all new, good to go. Just click import, and this stuff will start to be added to the project. All right, and when it's finished, you'll find you've got this new little Lofelt folder down here. It's got some scripts and plugins, which you're not going to need to worry about right now, but I'll just draw your attention to this examples folder. Inside here, you'll find an actual demo app that you can build for Unity and deploy to iOS or Android. It's a lot quicker than doing this entire tutorial, but the results from this tutorial are more interesting. And then also is this folder here, which says Audio Haptic Examples. Now inside you'll find two different folders, Application UX and Gaming, and this is where you find all the ready-to-use haptic and audio assets that you can use in your own applications. So if you click on Beep, you can see there's a haptic and an audio file here. These will make a little more sense once we take a look at the mobile app in a little bit, but I just wanted to point those things out to you. Now, just a quick overview of how we implement haptics with the Unity plugin and its similarities to how Unity already handles audio in the game. So if you take a look at the main camera and take a look at the inspector on the right here, you can see a number of components that are attached to the main camera, and one is called Audio Listener. Now the point of this is it's like a virtual microphone that is sitting basically from the camera's perspective, and the various game objects like things you collect or enemies, even the player themselves will usually have some kind of audio source attached to them. So the audio sources will emit audio in the game environment, and this audio listener will then receive that audio, and it does it from the perspective of the viewport. So that allows things that are maybe farther away from the camera to not be as loud and stuff like that. So we've provided the same kind of structure for the haptic system in this plugin. And so you can find, if you just go to Add Component down here and type Haptic, you'll now see a new component here called Haptic Receiver. And so go ahead and click on that, and it gets added to the main camera, and its function is essentially the same as the audio listener. It is going to receive any vibrations that are output by any of the game objects that have haptic sources attached to them. So let's go ahead and try attaching a haptic source to a game object. I'm going to start with something easy. I'm going to go into the enemies here, and we're going to take a look at one of the enemies. Take a look at its inspector over here on the right. So there's a lot of things already set up on this enemy, including an audio source, like I was discussing earlier. So this is the thing that outputs a sound, which will then get picked up by the audio listener that is on the main camera. So what we want to do is we want to add a haptic source to this enemy, but we can't do it yet because what I want to do is I want to actually add it to all the enemies equally. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is open the prefab for this enemy. This enemy is showing up blue. That means it's kind of a copy of the same enemy over and over again. So by hitting this little arrow, I now go into the prefab mode. And now whatever changes I make here to this one instance will apply to all instances of the enemy in this game. So I'll go ahead down to Add Component and choose Haptic Source. And there it gets right there at the bottom, Haptic Source. And you can see I can even assign a haptic clip to it. But what kind of haptic clip should I assign to this? Well, it kind of depends on what it sounds like, what kind of sound is assigned to this enemy. And if we scroll up here, we can see this enemy controller script has a couple things on it. And one of the parameters is called ouch. And you can see there's an audio file assigned to it called land on enemy. So I'm going to take a look over here in the audio folder, and sure enough, there's an audio file here called land on enemy. And if I select it and then come over here and press this little play icon, I can get an example of what it sounds like. And it sounds like a kind of a splat. And indeed, this game, the enemies are these little red blobs. So it would make sense that it would kind of go splat, this little sound, if you were to land on one. So what we want to do then is we want to assign a haptic to this enemy that kind of feels like that splat. Okay, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to choose one of the pre-made haptics that are provided with Lofelt Studio. So you can see when you click here, there's a whole list of things that come up. But which one should we actually use here? There's a lot of things to choose from. Well, that's what the Lofelt Studio mobile app is for. So if you go over to your phone and open up the Lofelt Studio app that you downloaded, it will bring you to a page called the library. And you can see at the top there's a whole bunch of demo videos that you can scroll through and play, and I encourage you to watch them. They're really exciting. But when you scroll down a bit, you'll start seeing things like app interactions and gaming. And if you recall, those were the names of the folders that we saw earlier when looking through the Lofelt assets. So these are examples of all the audio and haptic assets that are available for you to use in your applications. And all you need to do is just click on one, and you will both hear and feel the associated haptic with it. So you can just start looking through these things and see if there's something that kind of feels the way that kind of splat sound sounded. And I recommend turning off the audio on your phone so you just focus on the feeling of these things. Some of them are different, but I think this hover 1 for some reason kind of feels like a splat. Kind of has that kind of splatty texture to it. So I think that's the one I'm going to use here. So when we come back to the computer, we can go ahead and choose hover 1 from the list, and we can now see that hover 1 is assigned to this haptic source. So we are good to go. We can go ahead and leave this prefab here and save the changes. And now when we look at the enemies, we can see there's a haptic source with a hover 1 haptic assigned to all of them. Well, that was really, really easy. Yeah, but we're not quite there yet. What we need to do next is we need to actually be able to trigger that haptic to play back at the right time in the game. And that is controlled by a script that's elsewhere in this game. And so if we take a look in the scripts, in this folder here, there's going to be one called, where is it? There it is. Enemy death. So if we take a look at this script, we can see that there is a spot where the audio is triggered, right? This is the ouch sound that we saw earlier in the script. So what I'm going to do is add a line of code to trigger our haptic right after this audio gets triggered. So I'm going to start a new line, and I'm going to choose our enemy object, and I'm going to say get component haptic source play. So with that single line, I'm telling the script to trigger, to just play the current haptic source that's assigned to the enemy object. And we know that we've already assigned that hover 1 haptic to it. So with that line of code, that should just immediately play that haptic right after the audio is initially triggered as well. So that's it. That's all we have to do. We can just save this, close, and come back to Unity. It will recompile things real quickly. And we are good to go. Now our enemies will be able to output haptics when they get squashed. But let's make this a little more interesting. Let's maybe add some haptics to the player themselves. So when we take a look at the inspector here for the player, we see something very similar to what we saw on the enemy. There's an audio source, and there's also a player controller script. But this one is a little more detailed. When we take a look here, there's actually 3 different audio files assigned to this player right now. There's audio for jump, audio for respawn, and audio for ouch, which I guess, that's when the player runs into the enemy and gets hurt instead of stomping on them. So there's 3 different audio files assigned here. And so we're going to have to do something a little more clever this time by switching the haptic clip that gets played based on what the user just did, if they jumped or came back to life or were damaged by an enemy. But in any case, we start this the same way. We still need to add a haptic source to this object. We don't need to go into the prefab to do this since there's only one instance of the player right now. But I'm not going to bother assigning a haptic clip to it right now. We're going to change the haptic clip assignments through code, as I'll show in a moment here. Now, when it comes to actually choosing the haptics that we want to use, this time I'm going to show you how to actually design matching haptics, or at least generate matching haptics for these 3 audio files using the Studio Desktop tool that I was talking about earlier. So when we take a look at the audio folder here, we can see death, hurt, and jump. Death, hurt, and jump. These are the 3 that we're going to want to convert into haptic files. So I'm going to just reduce this down a little bit here and launch Studio Desktop. All right. And this is a really simple process. Just take one of the sounds, drag it in, and then click Analyze in Studio Desktop. It'll work its magic for you. And in a second, there's our haptic envelopes and everything that just came out. Now, there's a lot more I can do at this point in Studio Desktop. There's controls for me to change the kind of analysis algorithm that was used, as well as even going in and actually individually editing the breakpoints in these envelopes. But the automatic analysis in this tool is so good that I'm not even going to bother doing any of that. I'm already confident that what I'm going to get out of this is good enough for the purposes right now. So I'm just going to immediately go up to File, choose Export the Haptic. I'm not going to save as. This is saving the project, like the whole project in Studio Desktop, which I don't want to do right now. I just want to export the haptic clip, which is the little file that contains the haptic information that the Unity plugin will use for playing haptics back while the game runs. So I'm going to choose this, and a quick little dialog box comes up and asks me which format I would like to export. This tool does allow the export of the Apple native AHAP format, which is used by Core Haptics, but that's only for iOS. For our Unity plugin, you need to export this haptic format right here. This is the cross-platform haptic file that will work on both iOS and Android equally. So you don't actually need to create one version for iOS and another version for Android. You just create this one haptic file, and it works on both platforms automatically. So I'm going to choose haptic. And what I need to do now is, as you can see, it's dropped us into the audio folder inside the Unity project. This is where the original sound came from. But what I want to do is just go up a level to the Assets folder and create a new folder called Haptics. And in here, I will go ahead and save this file, which is already named death.haptic. It just took the name of the original audio file automatically. So I'll save it, and that will go into the project. And I'm just going to choose a new Studio Desktop project. I'm not going to bother saving because I didn't even do anything. And just drag in the next audio file, which is hurt. Click Analyze. It looks different because it sounds different, and we just do the same thing again. Export, throw it into the Haptics folder, and we do it one more time for the jump sound. Give it a quick analyze and export as Haptic into the Haptics folder. And that's it. We are done with Studio Desktop. So we can close it out and come back to Unity. And we can see in this Haptics folder, we now have 3 new haptics to choose from: Death, Hurt, and Jump, which is the ones we want for our player. Now, in order to be able to assign these to the player, we need to be able to add like 3 more of these, I don't know what you call these, like drop targets into the script so we can assign the same haptics to them. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the script. And one of the first things we're going to do, we can see right here at the top of the script, these 3 lines are what bring these 3 things up in this inspector. And so I'm going to create 3 similar ones specifically for the the haptic clips that we want to use. So here we go. Public haptic clip jump haptic. Public haptic clip respawn haptic, and public haptic clip ouch haptic. Okay, so that will, when we're done here, add 3 little drop zones for us to assign the haptics. And you can see as you'll see here, I'm going to just kind of keep following the same sort of code pattern that already exists for all the audio in this script. That's kind of what makes this whole haptic system so easy, is you just kind of mirror everything that's already been done. So like, for example, down here, you can see there's public audio source, and it's been assigned to a variable called audio source. Well, I'm going to do the same thing again. Public haptic source, and call this haptic source, like that. Okay, so now I've got a variable that is going to, of haptic source type, which when we get down here, I'm going to assign the haptic source component to. So haptic source equals get component, component haptic source, like that. Okay, so if you remember when we added haptics to the enemy, I wrote enemy.getComponent haptic source .play. This will just end up shortening up that code a bit, as we'll see once we start editing some of the other scripts. Now, as it turns out, that's it. There's nothing else in this script related to triggering of any of the audio. So we're actually done with what we need to do here in the script for now. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and close it and come back to Unity, allow it to recompile. And now when we take a look at the player, we now have 3 spots where we can assign our haptic clips. So, jump. This needs to be the jump haptic. This guy here, respawn, was death. So we find the death one. And ouch haptic was called hurt. So we find that one right there. Okay, so now we've got our 3 haptics assigned, and they match the 3 audio files that we took them from. Okay, so now we have to do a similar kind of exercise that we did with the enemies. We need to go find the scripts where the individual sounds for the player are triggered. So we'll go back into the scripts folder and take a look at, is it gameplay? Yeah, so like player jumped. We can open up this one, and right there we can see there is the code for triggering the audio assigned to player jump. And so we're going to do something very similar now to trigger the haptic for jump. But if you recall earlier, we didn't actually assign any clip to that haptic source yet. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and say player.haptic source. This is that variable that we created earlier. Clip, which is a property, and we're going to call that player jump haptic. Okay, that makes sense, right? We can see they've assigned jump audio up here, and so we're assigning jump haptic right below to our haptic source, and then player.haptic source, and this time it's play. And that's it. So just like that, we've been able to add, we've been able to tell the system to assign the jump haptic to the haptic source and then play it. And that's all we need to do. We can save this and close it. And it will go ahead and recompile here. All right. Now the next thing we want to look at are, there's two more. So there's player death, and we can see there's a similar thing here. So I'm going to just do the same pattern again. Player.haptic source clip equals player.hap, what was it called? This is ouch haptic, and then player.haptic source.play, and that's it. We're done with that one. Close it, save it, recompile, and the last one just happens to be in the script called player spawn. So go down here, and you probably know what's going to happen already by now. Haptic source clip equals player respawn haptic player, haptic source play, and we're done. Just like that, we've now assigned haptics to all these events. Now, if this was already a mobile game, we would just be able to compile at this point and deploy it to the phone and be able to play it and test it. But this game in particular won't actually be playable if we were to install it on a phone right now, because it's designed to be controlled with the computer keyboard. And so in order to make this playable on a phone touchscreen, we need to actually add some touch controls to the screen for moving left and right and jumping. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to use an asset from the Unity Asset Store called Simple Input. That's it. And yeah, I'll show you how to get that here and install it. Okay, so let's go find this Simple Input asset on the Asset Store. I'm just going to go to Window, Asset Store, search online. This will take us to the Asset Store. Yep. And I'm going to, well, you can see I've already searched for it before. Simple Input System is what we want. So when you click on this, it should, yeah, here it is, right there. So Simple Input. This is the thing we want. Just go ahead and click to allow it to open in Unity. And here come the packages. And Simple Input System. That's the thing we want here. There we go. And go ahead and import that. Yep, all these things. Great. Okay, now that that's done, we can close the package manager, and we can also close this tab here. And we should see in plugins, there's this Simple Input plugin down here. And most importantly, there's this little folder called prefab. So we're going to be needing to use that in a second. Now, this is a bit of a hack, what I'm about to do here, I think, to make this work. But what I'm going to do is basically add a new canvas here, like this. The canvas ends up being really strangely offset from the rest of the game. Yeah, zoom is really strange. But this is essentially kind of the screen area that's going to happen once this game starts running. And what I'm going to do to this is I'm going to add an image to it. Where do I do that again? UI image. Yeah, puts this square up there. I'm going to go over here onto the inspector and choose source image. Scroll down and choose knob. And that's going to give us this nice little round circle here. Now I'm going to anchor this to the bottom right corner of the screen, and this is going to essentially be the jump button that we're going to use. And then for the left and right motion, we're going to go into this plugins, simple input prefabs. And you'll see this little prefab here called arrows horizontal. So go ahead and drag that up into the canvas and it'll put 2 arrows there. And I'm going to make them a little closer together just for my personal taste. These happen to already be anchored to the bottom left corner, so everything should be good. And when we look at the game screen, we can see there they are. The 2 controls are now overlaid on top of the screen. If you think they're a little too high, maybe you just move them down a touch. This guy can come down and that's about even. Let me take a look at the game again. Okay, that feels decent. So now that we've got these touch controls here, we need to be able to assign them to do something. So if we take a look at the button that we have selected, I'm going to go add a component down here, and this is going to be simple. Is it called? Actually, I think it's called button. There it is. Button input UI. So that component gets added, and just need to add a name to this thing. What is the function of this button? Well, in this case, it's going to be jump. All right, so I'm going to assign jump to that. And when we take a look at the prefab of the horizontal arrows, we can see that it actually already has a UI script already attached to it, and the x-axis is already called horizontal. So this one's already good to go. So we now need to tell this game to take the input from this system rather than the computer keyboard. And that is done in the player controller script. So if we open up that script again, and we scroll down a little bit, we will see 3 instances of input right here. This just needs to be changed to simple input in all 3 cases. And now it will take the input from the touch controls instead. Just like that. So we save. Allow the system to recompile. And we're done. We are ready. Oh, actually, this should probably be out a level now that I think about it. How can I get that out? That looks better. Okay, so we take a look at the game. Yep, still looks good. All right, so now if we want to build this for iOS, for example, we go up to File, Build Settings, and we need to switch to the iOS platform. So select on iOS and click Switch Platform. And this will cause a lot of things to re-import and recompile. So I will be right back once this work is done. Okay, so it's all set up now for iOS. Before we build though, you just need to go into the player settings. Here we are. Okay, so project settings, let's open this up. Now, while this is still a beta version of the Unity plugin, there's one little workaround that you need to do for the time being, and that is to scroll down here until you find Allow Unsafe Code. There will be a few warnings that would pop up without this being checked. This is obviously going to be fixed by the time this goes into full release, but for the time being, just go ahead and select that, and that's all you need to change in here. And once everything is done building, this little guy is still spinning down here on the right. There we go. Then you can go ahead and click build and it will build the iOS version. Okay, and now the system will go ahead and compile a new xcode project from this game. Okay, there it is. It's finished. We go inside. We can see we have an Unity iPhone xcode project. We can just double click on that. That will launch xcode and load this project. All I need to do is set up the code signing correctly here, which will be Lofelt. I'll give this a name like Lofelt. Platformer. Okay. And since haptics don't work on iPad, I'm just going to compile iPhone version here. And yeah, it's got my iPhone 8 connected, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and it will build and deploy to my phone. Okay, it's now being installed on my phone, and it will start running here in just a moment. And there we go. There's our game. We can run around, we can jump, and we feel the haptics when we jump up. We feel the haptics when we land on an enemy. Oh, we also feel it when we hurt, and we feel it when we respawn again. So that's it. That's all that's necessary to add haptics to a mobile game. Very simple. Now, if you want to do this for Android, the process is pretty similar. We can go back to our build settings here in Unity, switch over to the Android platform, at which point, again, it will recompile everything and maybe retranscode a few files. So I'll be back when that's done. Okay, and there's also one small thing you need to adjust before you can deploy to Android. So if you open the player settings, in this case, you'll need to just make sure you've got, for the minimum API level, Oreo, API level 26 selected. Now, this is only a temporary issue when currently using the beta version. Future versions won't have this minimum API level. It will be able to build for older versions, but just be aware that below this API level, there probably won't be any haptics because those devices don't support it correctly. But at least the game will build. Your players can still play the game just without haptics, but it won't provide them any errors or anything negative like that. So once that's selected, you can go ahead and close the project settings, click Build, provide the name, and hit Save, and it'll go ahead and build the APK for you, which you can then load onto your Android phone to test. And that's it. That's how you add haptics to a game in Unity using Lofelt Studio. Yeah, I invite you to go to lofelt.com and check out more about Lofelt Studio, and also look at the documentation, which is at developer.lofelt.com. I can even show you that real quick. So right here are the docs, and you'll be interested in this integrating haptics part, Studio plugin for Unity. This covers everything that was discussed in this video, in case there's anything you forgot or want some more details about. But also of interest is this section about authoring haptics. So you saw that I converted some audio files into haptics very fast using Studio Desktop. Well, this will go into depth about all the other things that you can do in Studio Desktop, how to control the analysis parameters, how to go in and manually edit the haptics, shifting the view around, editing breakpoints, all those kind of things, and how to connect this application to your mobile phone. So when you are actually working on a haptic in Lofelt Studio, you can then actually preview it right on your phone. So you don't even need to take the haptic clip and put it into Unity and build and go through all that entire process just to feel what the haptic feels like. You can feel it on the phone immediately. So check all this out. There's a lot more to learn about Studio than what was covered here. But I think you'll find it is a lot of fun, and it's very easy and quick to throw even just a prototype together, as well as putting that final touch of gloss on the application by providing these very customized haptics for your games. Thanks a lot for your attention. Have a lot of fun, and if you have any questions, go ahead and contact us at lofelt.com. We'll be happy to answer them. Thanks a lot.